Inyash, why don't you lead us in?
Okay, welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Inyash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm just Dicky.
And today we have with us, I'll go ahead. We've got Rudi Hoffman, who, if anyone's listened to every episode of this so far, you guys will be familiar with his name. He was the life insurance agent who got me hooked up with Cryonics, and he's also the author of The Affordable Immortal, which the
nice. You got a copyright there.
I do.
Which I guess doesn't matter to our podcast listeners.
No, right. Yeah, we're, again, still doing this all distantly, so we're all doing this over a web conference, and then in order to maintain some semblance of actual communication, we've got our webcams on. But for listeners, it is a physical book that you can buy called The Affordable Immortal. And Rudi, why don't you tell us about the book and about you and what you do?
Outstanding. Delighted to, Stephen, and thank you for listening, everybody out there. It's exciting to be talking to a whole lot of wonderful invisible human beings in non-real time. The science fiction lifestyles are obviously really existing as we speak. I've thought for decades about how cool it would be to have multiple conferences where here we are, and I'm literally looking at myself and three other people on the video screen in front of me and talking to thousands of people in a non-real-time basis. So science fiction is not science fiction, it's actually real. And along with that idea, cryonics, of course, is the cooling of human beings to minus 196 degrees Celsius in order to preserve us for future technology.
That was a hell of a segue.
That was a hell of a segue. Yeah, thank you. And I have actually written the book, which I'm cleverly holding up, which is helpful to at least three people on the planet right now. But since there's no video for their listeners, that's basically the title of the book again is The Affordable Immortal. Maybe You Can Beat Death and Taxes, with an exclamation point, by Rudi Hoffman. It's published on Amazon and available through Amazon in both Kindle formats and hardback and paperback formats, basically about $12.
I got a quick question about that subtitle there.
Okay.
Does it have anything about how to beat taxes in it?
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. And the title is obviously a riff on the well-known Ben Franklin quote, which is "Nothing is certain." In this quote, I actually started out in the book. It says, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." So yes, the idea behind the funding mechanisms we use, basically a life insurance policy, also in addition to funding your cryopreservation, also has inherent tax advantages in it. So they're actually, it's not just a clever title designed to riff on the beating death and taxes quote by Ben Franklin. It also happens to be based in the reality that there's tremendous tax benefits and advantages to life insurance.
Okay. Little bonus sticking it to the man while we're at it.
Absolutely. And with $2.2 trillion being recently as this week shoved out to try to keep things from going to heck completely, the taxation factor is liable to be much more extreme in the future. And so that those tax benefits are not insignificant. I'd be happy to briefly, life insurance has tax-free death benefit, tax-free accumulation of the money while it's growing, tax-free access to the money while it's in the policy. So it's one of the reasons why a lot of smart, wealthy people stuff money into life insurance policies. But the really, really smart ones use life insurance to fund their cryopreservation, which means that this amazing new technology that is an emerging science is not just a good concept, but basically an accessible and affordable technology for a whole lot of people. Not everybody, but for something like $1 a day or $2 or $3 a day, money that a lot of us blow in a Starbucks back when you could go to Starbucks. By the way, for those of us who are hearing this, we are recording this, of course, on what is this, April the 2nd of 2020, about 32 days into the zombie apocalypse. And for the future, when we listen to these podcasts in the future, we'll say, "Oh my goodness, do you remember how rapidly that happened? That all of a sudden everything completely changed."
Yeah.
But we can talk about the COVID-19 thing, which it hardly goes. I don't think there's a conversation occurring perhaps on the planet that does not mention that. But as a point of information, that's one of the reasons our cryonics inquiries have actually stepped up, because the imminence and reality of death in its most ugly forms has become more obvious to, I think, all of us. I was talked today with a video conference with one of my clients who happens to be COVID-19 positive.
Ooh.
And along with her, 2 out of the 3 kids are COVID-19 positive. So it's not theoretical, it's real. People do get sick, people die, people have accidents, and to my way of thinking, every one of those deaths is like a library burning down, a true tragedy. Think about the amount of information that's composed in your brain, in each of your brains, and it puts a library to shame. It's basically, we have trillions of bits of information, and each of us is kind of an irreplaceable part of the universe, and to have that consciousness, that whatever it is that makes us go away almost certainly permanently, because there's no evidence that any of the silly superstitions people call religion is accurate. And to have that go away permanently is just a true tragedy. And for those who are, go ahead.
Oh, I'm not even sure like library is a good analogy anymore, because nothing in a library is unique nowadays. It's more like if the Library of Alexandria burned down, which was
brilliant. Yeah. Yes, thank you. It's the Library of well, there's truly irreplaceable information, and so if we think of ourselves as everything that has gone into making what we are, and in the old verbiage we'd call it a soul. Those of us who are hardcore rationalists and realists, typically reject that term. But there is something that makes you a unique, special entity. And the whole concept of cryonics is that by simply preserving you in the brain pattern that you are, there's a reasonably good possibility, we think, that a future technology can fix what we died of, fix the damage caused by the process itself, and restore us in some form, in some mechanism, to vibrant and levels of good health and bliss that we even only dream of now. And that is the dream I sell, if you will, and it may come across as a little flaky. But we try to be, while we try to be hardcore rationalists, I think it's also incumbent upon me as a promoter of cryonics, and I'm unabashedly a promoter of cryonics, to basically explain that our mission is not simply to come back in the format that we might die from. Obviously, nobody wants to come back near death and feeling awful and old and aged and decrepited and have
and full of cryoprotectant.
Full of cryoprotectant, which is, by the way, still fairly toxic.
Yep.
And so instead, but the premise of cryonics is to actually come back feeling as good or better than you felt the best day of your life, when the miraculousness of being alive, of having being existing, was just really obvious. And I would love to say I have a whole bunch of days like that. I don't know if about you, but I don't. But every once in a while you do have one that's close. You say, oh my goodness, this is what it's about.
I used to have pretty darn good days until I injured my back about almost a year ago now, and it's been eye-opening to see what it's like to live with pain. And I didn't quite realize what it was like for people that had to do that.
Wow, it is paradigm shifting, I suspect.
I mean, I feel so much worse for everything Steven's ever gone through, because I know he's got the same thing, and yeah, it makes you hate our monkey meat suits even more. There should be some way to get this stuff fixed up.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I maintain mine's a little less severe.
What was that a reference to, Stephen? I didn't quite.
I should mention that he felt bad because I've had back issues for let's see, it's April, coming up on 9 years, I guess, but it's not as severe as what Enosh is going through. So I just wanted to make that clear that he's been more, he's been enduring more than I have. So I don't want you to pretend like I'm doing a whole lot, Enosh. I needed that out for posterity. But yeah, so I like the. I guess I'll let you keep going with the. Just by all means, please continue, Rudy. As enjoying.
Oh yeah, thank you. Well, thank you. I think the concept here we're talking about is the bliss of how potential bliss, and I think a lot of smart people, including some of the people very possibly listening to this podcast, have speculated that in the future we won't just have levels of misery, and quite frankly, the human condition has enabled levels of misery that are just shocking to most of us. And Enosh, to have that paradigm shift where all of a sudden your back hurts is helpful to me. I mean, it makes us realize, hey, and I've had a situation where my wonderful wife has both of her knees just hurting virtually all the time. We're basically, and that is pretty, it's a drag. Let's face it, the human condition has some pretty awful components to it.
I much more understand why youth was so valued in the past, because 100 years ago, if you had this sort of injury, you're just like, oh, okay, I'm broken and much less useful to everyone around me for the rest of my existence now, plus all the pain. And
yes.
At least 100 years ago, you had like alcohol and opium to help you through the pain. Go back a few hundred years more and you got nothing. You're just, God damn.
But at least now,
really tough.
At least now you can still contribute to society, and you're not just having to run around lifting heavy things and carrying, dead animals and stuff. You can contribute.
Right.
You can
those
contribute
buggers
value
must have been
with your
incredibly
mind.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, they didn't have a choice. It wasn't like there was a choice. You think about how much better life is, and I think, Enosh, that's a reasonable, jump. And some of us, I'm sure, some of you listening to this have read one of my very favorite books of all time. By the way, Bill Gates said this is my favorite book of all time, and it's not my book, unfortunately.
It's Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality.
Yeah, almost. That should be another great book. But the book, of course, is by Steven Pinker, called Enlightenment Now. I see that Enosh is shaking his head yes.
Well, I haven't read it, but I know of it.
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. I've read it like 4 or 5 times, listened to the audio tape 4 or 5 times. But the subtitle is The Case for Rationality. Let's see, the case for reason, science, humanism, and progress. And I suspect that the niche market that comprises your podcast listeners appreciate those values, and cryonicists and transhumanists of all sorts resonate with those values. The thing is, we now have the technology to do stuff that was clearly science fiction in the past, including this conversation that we're having. And we also are really close to having the technology, although we can't prove it works, to cryopreserve people. And I think it's an important distinction here to make the very important distinction between the thing called proto-science or early science or emerging science and pseudoscience. A lot of folks, including the people who many would call themselves hardcore skeptics, might lump cryonics into the pseudoscience arena. Matter of fact, even Wikipedia, which is usually a wonderful bastion of great wisdom, for lack of a better word, and helpful information, has been taken over by trolls in the cryonics arena. There's a couple of people out in the world, for some reason, that really, really do not like cryonics. And for some reason, and I'm not sure exactly why, they have managed to take over even the Wikipedia entry. And instead of saying this is an emerging science in which the very best technology is brought to bear to preserve human consciousness, instead they say this is freezing corpses, and most scientists think this is completely ludicrous, and there's some verbiage in there that's really kind of off-putting, that's not even-handed at all.
To be fair, it is technically freezing corpses.
Yes, and that's a very important point. I see that hand, Ms. Jess. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what was it, 4,000 listeners, you go edit Wikipedia if you're listening.
oh yes, thank you. Yeah, because we've had some.
Like when
Go ahead.
Like when Stephen Colbert saved the elephant population.
Yes.
He had his audience go and like add a 0 to the number of elephants in the wild, and he's like, "We did it. We saved them."
Wow. I like it.
Although this will be less dishonest.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great analogy, though. And that is a. But the reason I'm bringing that out is because Wikipedia, in my mind, has been one of the most amazing emerging technologies that has enabled collaboration of some of the best information. And I'm not negative about Wikipedia by any means. It's just an anomaly having to do with the current way that Cryonics, if you can look at Cryonics and how it's perceived on there. In contrast, of course, we have a open letter signed by hundreds of scientists that says Cryonics will almost, has a very good chance of working. We can't guarantee it works any more than your doctor can guarantee your heart operation is going to work. The reality is there's lots of variables can go wrong in any technology and any emerging technology, but conceptually we have good reason to believe, and we have actual positive documentation and photomicrographs to show that brain structure, your actual structure, is preserved with a high degree of fidelity, down to not just the cellular but even intracellular level. And that is the whole concept of vitrification, which is not freezing, and it's an important distinction. We're not, quote, freezing corpses. Two wrong concepts there. One, just cause somebody, the difference between you being near death and all of a sudden being pronounced dead does not mean your brain pattern goes away. We know that from many people who have been brought back. And it turns out their brain pattern, if it wasn't more than 10, 15 minutes, is still there. And if they're cooled down, if you fall in the ice someplace, we have half an hour, 45 minutes, hour, sometimes 2 hours, people have been brought back with their brain pattern still intact. This is hard science.
Yeah,
this is reality.
A corpse is defined as, when legal death has been proclaimed, and that's just someone saying, yep, this person's dead now. So
great.
It's a gray line.
Precisely.
But you're not dead. You're not dead until you're warm and dead.
Yes, and your brain pattern starts to really go away. Now, which is not saying that if you die someplace and have, an hour and a half or 3 hours or 2 days of warm temperature ischemia, that's not a bad thing. Obviously, we don't think there may, at some point, there's a concept called information theoretic death that'd be pretty difficult to come back from. But the whole idea that death is a single binary event is simply, quite frankly, ignorant. And it's ignorance that we should not have, given the current information that people have clear access to. So a corpse is not a corpse just because some medical professional says he's dead. The other thing is that we're not freezing people. We're basically cryopreserving them with the best medical technology we have, which still is not perfect. But the new vitrification protocols, especially when properly executed immediately after pronouncement of legal death, preserve structure with a high degree of fidelity. And that's an important concept, and I think it's an important concept our listeners should understand.
So I know there's been, actually I don't remember how many exactly. I know it's been over 100 people that have been vitrified so far. Do you know how many of those were really good cases? Because I know some percentage of them were less than ideal when they were getting vitrified, and I don't know how many were in good conditions.
Yes, thank you. And I will make sure that you get your observation in there, Jess. But right now, the status of Cryonics is that there's less than 5,000 people signed up. There's probably about 150 people at Alcor who are cryopreserved, about that same number at the Cryonics Institute. To answer your question, earlier cryopreservations, a lot of them were bad, quite frankly. The mechanics and logistics were simply not there. The cryoprotective agents and earlier protocols were simply, primitive, quite frankly. In direct response to your question, I just spoke with Diane Cremines, the Alcor director and membership person, and I was asking her that very question. What percentage now are getting good cryopreservations? And their statistics for the last 4 years is about 82% are getting really what we call good cryopreservations at bedside bedside pronouncements where the cryonics techs with their perfusates and their ice are literally right there the minute and moment death is quote pronounced, you're immediately cooled down. So that's a long answer to a short question, but right now basically 80% of people are getting good cryopreservations. And Jess,
That's a really.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to make sure that I respond to Jess's. You can't see it if you're listening, but she has her finger up, which I thought was nice.
Yeah, we've been trying to make hand signs so we're not just talking over each other all the time. It's harder
I'm sorry,
to
I don't
see
even
on the
see
camera.
you unless you talk. Yeah.
Oh, because you don't have the strip up top?
I don't have the strip. I don't know why it's not there. Anyway, yeah. Go on.
I'm curious what makes cryopreservation more than just freezing now, and like particularly what made the old process bad, and that has been improved in the new process.
That's a reasonable question, Jess. The big distinction, what I'd call a real bright, shiny line, and that it's still just now emerging into popular consciousness, is that the distinction between basically straight freezing, i.e., they take you and I, if any of us right now, your heart stops beating and we throw you in a freezer and then throw you in liquid nitrogen, basically a thing called freezing occurs. We're about 70 or 80% water. When we know that you put a tomato in the freezer and freeze it, it's not the same tomato that it was, when you bring it out. That's because a whole bunch of bad things happen with freezing. And so the concept is to instead replace the water in our systems with a vitrification agent. The new vitrification agents basically replace that water with a vitrification solution, in essence a biological antifreeze. That means when things cool down, instead of having ice shards, instead of having a whole lot of pressures and osmotic pressures as a function of the cooling, everything kind of glassifies in place. If you can think of like a plastination process. Now that does not mean we can still bring any people back, or even we don't have cats and rats and dogs yet from cryonic temperatures. We do have vitrified organs that are viable after being carefully vitrified. But to answer your question, that distinction has to do with the current vitrification agents, and that actually occurred about 10 or 15 years ago, although the current iterations are better and better, less toxic, reduce freezing damage even greater as the iterations improve. Was that responsive to your observation or question?
Yeah. How do they prevent cell rupture, these new agents?
Yeah, it's my understanding that basically the freezing process requires basically water. Water is, and the idea is to do initial washout with a washout solution that washes the blood out, because blood will coagulate and become acidified and slower, and then in a separate process promote through the vasculature, through the carotids, the vitrification agent that basically goes through our entire vasculature, which you probably know is 100,000 kilometers long. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of wiring in us, and utilizing the existing vasculature in our system, that perfusate goes through our system and gets pretty much to all of our cells. Now, there are some areas that are hard to perfuse, the inside of your eyes and your inside of your blood marrow, bone marrow. So, it's not a perfect process yet, but our main thing is to get our brain perfused, and that's what the distinction now is. We now have photomicrographs of what happens with good cryopreservation to brain structure, where it shows all the neurons and dendrites basically still there. Now, warming them up, of course, is still a problem because there's a separate set of damage upon warming them up. But the point being, we're preserving. Cryonics works if you define as preserved structure even today. Cryonics does not work if you say the definition is, can you take people down to liquid nitrogen level and bring them back with no damage? No, we can't do that yet, but we think there's a good reason that we have good reason to believe we will be able to.
Are you familiar with the connectome preservation project?
Yes, in general, that the guy that wrote the book on Connectome. I'm trying to think of his name. Come on, brain. He spoke at the one of the Alcor conferences.
I don't remember the name either.
This is the and I know there's a prize for the brain preservation prize that has recently been won by a fellow who worked for 21st Century Medicine, basically an organization that does cryonics research. Robert is his first name.
I think you guys interviewed him on an earlier episode before I was on the podcast.
Robert McIntyre.
Yeah,
That sounds
exactly.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's Robert McIntyre. He spoke and he'd used a combination of plasticization and cooling down to preserve brain structure. The challenge there being that plasticization is hard to actually,
It's destructive.
Yeah, it's destructive, and now it may work if we can microscan them and upload us to a computer, which is another good possibility, and that's most of us are quite open to that. This meat puppet, was that your verbiage there?
Yeah, meat suit, I
think. This meat puppet infrastructure and is prone to way too many problems. I agree. We need to find a way to upgrade this, and most of the people who are signed up for Cryonics are really forward-thinking, smart people who realize that basically this particular thing that DNA and we've evolved to is not the end in itself. It's just a kludge that's been put together and how we happen to be here. It's evolution in action, but it doesn't have to be the end of evolution. We got to continue to evolve to much more possibility creatures.
I think
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think most children, if you were to ask them to improve the design of the human, could come up with a bunch of ideas. Like, definitely, this is
Let's
not.
start with a back that doesn't hurt, with knees that don't screw up all the time.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to join the? You could join a class action suit because of all the glitches in the body, and maybe the question is, who do you sue? I was thinking the Pope. I'd like to sue that guy.
He's got money.
some money at least.
Yeah, that's right. He's a representative of God who allegedly designed us, so I think he should be held responsible for all the fact that they fuck up so much. It's just ridiculous.
Hey man, we were perfect before the fall, and then
Maybe that was it.
yeah, then God got really vengeful and introduced a bunch of errors, I guess. It's like roll them back to the prototype version.
But the main idea I do want to get across to our listeners in their limited time that we have is that not only that is cryonics a real legitimate emerging science, but that it's available and affordable to most people listening to this podcast. Even though there's a fairly high cost to it, basically $200,000 at Alcor, about $150,000 at CI for the whole package, that cost is typically borne by an extra life insurance policy that might cost 80 cents a day or $1.50 or $2 a day. Some kind of, some older, depending on your age, depending on the type of coverage you have. And we have people spending $4, $5, $6 a day, but a lot of times those are on policies that actually accumulate a cash value, that have that tax benefit of a cash value, and they're designed to go forever. They're permanent index universal life policies. But the point being, you don't have to have $200,000 to be signed up for Cryonics. You just need to be able to qualify for a life insurance policy, and the actual mechanism to find out is to simply go to rudihoffman.com, fill out the website form, get some quotes and get some ideas to see if this might be a fit. So excuse me for sounding a little bit like a salesman, but I happen to be a salesman.
I was about to give you a sales pitch and point out that I got on with Rudi, would have been something like 6 or 7 years ago, and I think I was paying $27 a month, and that covered the Cryonics membership, or not the membership, but the fee for the Cryonics Institute, as well as Hispanic Animation Incorporated, which is the company that flies out and actually gets your body ready for preservation and flies you out to a tank. And if you're at the Cryonics Institute in Clinton Township, Michigan, sometime last year you contacted me about getting on one of those beat taxes plans too. So that's the one that, like you said, there's like an accrued interest that I get to capitalize on whenever I want to cash out on it. If I wait till I'm 90, it's in the many hundreds of thousands or something.
I do have a question.
I don't remember the numbers
I do
right
have a
off.
question about that.
Yeah.
Mainly we want to cover a lot of the logistics of how this works, but since we're on this topic right now, you have to sign over ownership of the life insurance policy to the Cryonics Institute when you get it, right?
Yeah, great question, Inash. Both Alcor and the Cryonics Institute do require that they either be the owner or the joint owner of the policy, which is pretty much the only way they can be sure the policy's in place at any given moment.
Yes.
Because they do have to scramble the team, et cetera, before the actual money's there. But the great news is that the main carrier I'm working with now, for the last 10 years or so, enables the best of all possible structures, a thing called joint ownership, where basically you are the first owner, Inash, you are the first owner of the policy, and CI or Alcor is the second joint owner. So that way you can check on the status of the policy. The actual cash accumulation is 100% yours. It doesn't mean that you cannot change your mind or walk away or take all your cash value.
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to ask about. That if they're joint owners, how do you get all the cash out when you need to access it, if you need to access it?
The short answer is there's a secondary document that's both Cryonics orgs have that clarifies that you, even though they're joint owners, the entire cash accumulation and the entire ability to control the policy resides and stays with you.
Oh, good. Okay. So it's been 8 years since I signed that, and I just got to thinking about that a few months ago, and I was like, I know I was comfortable at the time, but I don't remember why.
Yeah, because a lot of times people have larger policies, like older folks might want to have a big, stuff larger amounts of money into the policy. And if you were putting tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars into a program over time, you want to make sure that the Cryonics org is not going to basically cabbage onto it. They are both very, very legitimate organizations, but even though we might intuitively feel that they would do that, that's not good enough. Everything is very much in writing. There's a document that specifies that you are the sole owner of any cash value and you maintain full control.
Okay, so if someone is like, hey, I want to get cryopreserved when I die, what does that entail? How does that work?
Of course, it's obviously we need to get you signed up while you're alive, and this is such an easy thing to put off, quite frankly. And as people are listening to this podcast, I want you to take a moment and realize that right now, wherever you are, at any given moment, something could happen to you. If you're driving in the car listening to this, if you're bicycling, as I listen to podcasts while bicycling, all of a sudden somebody could come out of left field and boom, there you are, you're gone. The point being, life is simply risky. And what you need to do is get your Cryonics arrangements in place early while you're young, while you're healthy, when you can qualify for life insurance. You qualify for life insurance not just with your money, but with your good health. And all of a sudden something happens, whether it's a heart glitch, whether it's high blood pressure, whether it's a cancer glitch, which by the way I had a few years ago, and all of a sudden life insurance may not be available, or it may be available at a much higher cost. So the mission here is to realize if you're really smart, you get ahead of the curve and grab this stuff while you can get it cheap and easy.
Yeah. I want to.
That makes sense.
Double back on that cheap and easy part thing, because I'm of the opinion that if you get killed in a car accident, you probably are not going to be successfully cryopreserved. It's just, at least in my opinion, unlikely that people will be able to get to you in time. But the vast majority of Americans die knowing that they're going to die. They die often in a hospital under supervision or in hospice care, well over 90% of people. And by the time you know you're dying, it's too late to get life insurance, because obviously no one's going to insure someone who's guaranteed to die anytime soon.
Yes.
The thing that really broke my heart was I knew of a person who was in the rationalist community, and she got brain cancer. This was 10 years ago or so, just a little before I signed up, I believe. And she wasn't signed up, didn't have life insurance, and I don't remember if there was enough donations made to get it funded before she died. But yeah, there's things like that can happen. Something acts up and you're like, oh great, now I have early cancer in my young age. Or even if you're not in your young age, if you're 25 and you sign up for a 30-year life insurance policy, a lot of things could happen before you hit 55. So getting it while you're young and it's really cheap is a great idea, because generally life insurance companies are like, haha, he's 25, he's getting life insurance. We're just going to, get his money for free because he's not going to die in the next 30 years. And they give you super low rates.
Great observation. But I think you're probably referring to Kim Suwazi, if I'm not mistaken, Enosh, 23-year-old. And again, if you're listening to this, I suspect you're probably, you may be older or younger than 23, but most people think at 23 there's not much existential risk. She basically got inoperable brain cancer, and she did throw herself on the part of the Reddit community and the compassionate arms of Cryonicist everywhere, including me. I actually spoke with, shared the platform with Kim Suwazi. I spoke immediately a few minutes after she spoke. It was hard to get the audience, basically to follow her, where she basically says, I know I'm dying. I'm going to be dead in a matter of probably weeks. It turned out to be a few months after that. There was actually a New York Times reporter that followed that whole story from roughly a year and a half from her finding out that she was had the glioblastoma and her boyfriend had called and see if we could get her life insurance. Obviously we could not. I was looking to see if I could find the sheet as you were talking about that. I got a call. This is Wednesday. It was this is Thursday. It was 2 days ago, and basically the guy was desperate to get life insurance, and he wanted to sign up for Cryonics, and so he signed up. He went to rudihoffman.com, filled the website form out, and I called him up, and he says, well, I want to get this done right away because I have a lung cancer that I'm going to die. And he was late 30s. I won't use his name because that would be inappropriate, but I did later. Of course, I had to tell him immediately, I'm sorry, you're completely uninsurable. No insurance carrier is gonna touch you with inoperable with basically lung cancer. And I went and looked at my records, and this is a moving part of this story. And I wish I could use his name, but that'd be tacky. God damn it! 3 years ago, this guy had called up, asked for a quote. We got him a quote. He wound up messing around and not doing anything. And here he is 3 years later and desperate for life. He didn't care what the rate was. He just needed some insurance. And so the point being, if he would have followed through 3 years ago, we would have covered him. He would have once you're covered, the insurance company can't change their mind. I have 11 policies totaling $3 million life insurance on myself. Most of them are written in a preferred health category. I had cancer 3 or 4 years ago. No insurance company would touch me with a 10-foot pole now. But because I had the policy early, you lock whatever health category you're in there, and the insurance company cannot change their mind. You can change your mind and say, I don't want the coverage. It's called a unilateral contract, but you can change your mind, but the insurance company can't. So at the risk, again, of sounding back in an ambulance up to the door and sounding like an insurance guy trying to, basically scare people into doing something, the reality is you ought to be scared. If you ain't scared, you ain't thinking straight. You're basically rationalizing and thinking that the rules do not apply to you, that you're never going to die, you're never going to get sick. Well, bullshit. I don't care how good a care you take of yourself. I don't care if you're vegetarian or vegan. It does not matter. There's a very, very, very high probability that you're going to need to get coverage. We're probably not going to get, unless you're super, super young, I doubt that we're going to beat aging in time for you. That's my message.
I'm assuming you're insured for a good long time, so I guess this is more a question to Stephen. Hey, Stephen, did you get the 30-year policy, or what did you get with yours?
I think I got the life policy. I'm not really sure. I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. The documents are in the safe in the closet behind me.
I can probably respond to that. Basically, Stephen started, I believe, with a term life insurance policy that's really, really inexpensive, especially in the early years, which is not an unreasonable place to start, especially if you're under 35 or so. And
when I signed up, I was delivering pizzas part-time, so I didn't really have a ton of expendable income.
Right. So basically, here's somebody delivering pizzas part-time who is able to afford to sign up for Cryonics. And maybe I just did a 25-year-old today. He bought $250,000 of a 20-year level term. It was $270 a year.
So I got, but to go back to Stephen, what is your plan after the term runs out? Because My my bet when I signed up was that either at that point we'll be much closer to me not needing life insurance anymore, or since I got the one that builds and that cashes out at the end of the 30 years, that would get me a good third of the way to being able to self-fund it, and maybe after 30 years of savings, I'd have the other 2/3 needed. Do you have a plan for what happens when the 30 years runs out?
I don't think I'm on a term policy anymore.
That's exactly
You
right.
happen to know what I'm on?
Yeah, that's what I was getting to, and your question,
Oh, okay.
Enosh, is absolutely brilliant, because term insurance is great in the early years because it's super cheap in the early years. It's super cheap in the early years because the odds are you are not going to die in the early years. But the term insurance that I work with, and to be fair, most other insurance guys do as well, is a thing called upgradable term, which means you can lock your term, your health in. You buy a 20-year term or a 30-year term for two, three, four, $500 a year. And what that does is lock your health in, but it also gives you a window because you can upgrade that term anytime in the first 20 years. Basically, you can upgrade it, as Stephen has done, to a permanent policy where the premium is going to be higher, but it's never going to go up. It will lock in level and then stay, and actually it'll pay itself in about 17 years.
Is the permanent
So
literally up until the point that you die, even if it's when you're 95?
even if it's 100, if you're 100, 125,
Holy-
basically our policies go to and past age 120.
Oh, damn. And I take it, Stephen, that the upgrade in cost was not all that great then, because I thought that the ones that are permanent are really expensive.
It's not. I don't have a good metric since I've only had the two policies. My first one is 27 a month. This one is within $1, $60.
Damn, yeah, no, that's not
Um,
bad at all.
Yeah,
No, I didn't think so. I mean, I pay more for Comcast and Excel Energy. I mean, I need those too. I don't know which I need more. If I need internet or life insurance more when I come to think of it. But
oh, well, we hope you won't have to make
'cause I don't have to
that
choose.
choice. Yeah, related to that, Enosh, is the fact that newer index universal life policies are simply not only better, they're simply cheaper than traditional whole life policies. And it is not magic. It's the cash accumulation, because there's an indirect exposure to the Standard & Poor 500 index. The actual growth on the policy is in the area of 6 or 7%, and the cash value. And what that means is that cash accumulation enables a policy to become paid up earlier in about 17 years. So you can pay $60 a month, and in maybe 17 or 18 years, there'll be enough money in the policy to pay it forever. You achieve escape velocity in your policy, where you can stop paying premiums, but the coverage stays in place. So it actually is in place in the later years when you need it. And that's what's, again, cool. Again, it's a new technology. The technologies we have are better than the old technologies, and everyone knows that with reference to their iPhone or their cell phone and their computer. But a lot of folks don't realize financial services has had an equivalent upgrade, where basically the newer programs are simply a whole bunch better. And that is why, if you were my own brothers or sisters, I'd say this is what we ought to do. Start with the term insurance if we need to for cash flow purposes, but try to upgrade that thing in the next 5 or 10 years to where it'll be in place forever. Was that responsive?
Yeah, that was great. So I want to get Cryonics. I filled out something on your website. Do I need to contact CI or Alcor as well?
Normally the actual protocol is initially filling my web, going to rudihoffman.com and looking the videos and filling the website out. And then you get your policy in place, and then I send a copy to the original policy to you, and if we send a copy digitally to CI or Alcor, so then they know that all the stakeholders have their funding in place, and then there's a separate set of paperwork you do directly over the net, directly with the Cryonics org.
Okay. Does Alcor work with local morticians? Because I think CI does still, right?
Both CI and Alcor utilize the same cryopreservation team, which is called Suspended Animation Inc.
Okay.
That is technically a segment that's actually not bundled together when you do CI. Alcor has it all bundled together, and they charge $200,000 for full body cryopreservation. CI has bundled it separately, where the CI portion is only 35,000 or even 28,000. You pay them 1250 a year one-time lifetime membership. But that actually is only part of it, because that's only the CI component. What you have to have is make sure that there's a mechanism to get you from where you are when you're sick or dying to where you need to be, and that is a separate team called Suspended Animation Inc. And they basically, their port's about $80,000. So we normally would do a CI package that's Cryonics Institute, Suspended Animation, and Private Air Ambulance. That global cost is $143,000, call it 150. And it's still good to have another. And since you can buy $250,000 coverage at 25, there's a quantity discount at 250,000. So basically, you can get a $250,000 policy for $200 or $300 a year if you do start with term. And that way you're overfunded. You got cryopreservation, you got the full transportation piece. You don't have to try to rely on local morticians, which is suboptimal in my informed opinion.
I wanted to ask, actually, I want to dive into that quite a bit. So my wife works in hospice care as a social worker right now, and
Oh wow, good for her.
I know, right? I belabor this point every time it comes up, but it is remarkable work that I have zero aptitude for. And since now we share, well, I have this room and she has the other room, but we share a home as our home office, and I can hear her working, and it is
Wow.
blows my mind hearing her
Oh
talk to
yeah,
people
she
and
works with people who literally
doing what she
die. She's
does.
literally working with people who are dying over a period of time. I don't have the goodies for that either. I respect the fact that somebody
Yeah, no,
does.
I mean she's been present to what they call MAID deaths, where people basically opt in for physician-assisted suicide. You need a doctor nearby, but not necessarily next to you. They give you a cocktail and you take it and you die sometime in the next hour or six.
Really? That's a
And
doable deal?
so
That's legal in
In
what state are you
Colorado.
in?
Colorado.
Oh yeah, you guys are
Yeah, so
progressives.
luckily that's legal here.
Wow, it should be
Yeah,
legal
so
everywhere.
I think
Yeah.
it's ideal
she,
for
she's been around for
people who want to get
those.
cryopreserved, because then you know exactly when you're going to die.
Precisely.
So that's what I wanted to ask about. Was I'm not 100% sure on the legalities. Well, because when I was talking with her about it, she's very interested in signing up. She'll get a life insurance policy at some point, and I'll get her a Cryonics policy. Like we'll make that happen. But she was skeptical because she sees that she'll occasionally. So basically, someone's on hospice. They've been determined by a doctor to be like they're going to die in the next 3 months. Um, you can't have suspended animation sit by your bedside for 3 months. And so, if you're going to die at some point of whatever is killing you in the next 90 days, usually what'll happen is she'll get a phone call. Hey, so and so died. Oh, okay. Let me start making phone calls. And then she calls the mortuary, the doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not uncommon for the mortuary transport people to take 2 hours to show up. And so obviously that's way longer than you want to wait for suspended animation to fly out and get you. So she was just curious, like, how on earth can you put all these pieces together to have this thing in place if you're dying under these conditions? And it sounds like obviously the best way to do it is, okay, well, I'm going to take my cocktail at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday. Be great if suspended animation could be there at 4:15 just in case, and have it be ready to rock and roll. But what is what are some of the logistic troubles of getting people preserved under optimal conditions? I should also mention that when you're signing up with Cryonics Institute, I think there were 4 boxes and of like, all right, what conditions do you want us to preserve you under? And one of them is like, do whatever you can, no matter what. If you have to scrape me off the sidewalk with a shovel, put that in the bag.
Put that in the bag. I love it.
I'm
Put that
I
in the
may be
bag and
selling
freeze it.
right. I think I am probably paraphrasing that wrong, but I think there is a
Yeah,
do
that's
whatever
exactly
you
the
can
verbiage.
option.
I read the whole thing. It's exactly what it said.
You're right. I checked the box that said use your own best faith estimate.
Good. Good
Sounds
call.
reasonable.
So Cryonics Institute won't preserve me if I get my head blown off with a shotgun by somebody who whatever attacks me on the street, or if I get run over by a car and they find me the next day. They're not going to pick up the pieces and throw the biggest parts in a vat. And then luckily there's a rider on my policy now where my wife is the beneficiary. Should Cryonics Institute not collect, she will. So it's just, I guess it's worth pointing out that you get to pick the conditions under which you'll be preserved as best you can in advance. Um, I guess, yeah, I wanted to get that long-winded question out of what can you do to maximize your chance of good preservation,
Yeah, that's a
and we can do that with or without a hospice
yeah.
situation.
You
Perfectly
brought up a lot
answer
of really
both.
important points there, Stephen, and I as have you folks as well. And that the optimal cryopreservation is not a black and white thing. It's a continuum, clearly. And one of the things we can obviously do is avoid what I'll call existential risks. If you're signed up for Cryonics, it probably is not an ideal thing to go do climbing mountains and fall in a crevasse because we aren't going to get you basically, or you go down over water and in a plane and there's simply no getting you. There are a number of circumstances that basically make cryopreservation impossible. First of all, as you point out, it's important to realize that life insurance does not go, it still goes to someone. You buy a $500,000 policy from me and you die by any old way, basically, including suicide after 2 years, by the way. We will pay that $500,000 to a series of someones. But with reference to getting the best cryopreservation, one of the reasons why Alcor is shooting about 80+% of good cryopreservations is, as you pointed out, Enosh, most of us have some lead time. Life is a lot safer than it used to be. We're not dying of accidents nearly as high percentage. Most of us, 80+%, are dying of things we have some lead time on. You die of cancer, we're dying of cardiovascular issues, and which means of the dozen or so Cryonics claims I've paid, nearly all of them had some lead time, physically got their ass to where they needed to be, to the hospice/hospital near their Cryonics facility, and consequently got really good cryopreservations. Related to the suicide question, or the assisted suicide question, which is something I've been pounding the drum on for decades, and we're finally, that was why I was so interested, Stephen, that it's legal and doable and actually being done where you're at in Colorado. The very first cryopreservation occurred with assisted suicide in California about 2.5 months ago. Yeah, it was the red letter day for a cryonicist, because basically this guy was able to do what rationalists understand we ought to be able to do, which is determine the circumstance of your deanimation. And because you can choose the time and the place, etc., it was it's a good cryopreservation. That obviously is not available in all states. Cryonics is probably controversial enough without adding assisted suicide to it. But at some point, interestingly, I don't know if this is an aside or not. It was too crazy to mention, but the person I was happened to be speaking with today, who is signed up for Alcor and has COVID-19, was at one point willing to fund a very large amount of money to help us do a court case where we would find a cryonicist who is dying, who would sue for the right to do a basically assisted suicide for cryopreservation. And once we get a case like that, then that would set precedent. Unfortunately, it was too early in the curve, basically, and the odds, I couldn't get anybody to sign on to this idea because it's too early. I did have an individual who actually was dying of Parkinson's, and he was okay to do it, and then his brother talked him out of it. But the point being, at some point, we will have a more rational way that you can decide about the circumstances of your death, which make cryonics a much more viable system to where all those logistics concerns, which are very real, will be much more minimized when assisted suicide is more of a standard of care.
I know that the cocktail they give in Colorado is heavily damaging to basically every system it hits before it kills you. And my wife wasn't sure if it also hit the brain. I sort of suspect, I mean, it must hit, if it's in your body for 6 hours, it definitely does, but I don't know how much damage it would do. And I don't know if there are other options for self-made deaths in Colorado other than this organ-shattering cocktail. I wonder, I guess without any details on that, I couldn't speculate on whether or not that would hurt your chances, but
Yeah, that is a good question.
of a successful prior
I,
vision.
I know there must be things that can kill you that don't necessarily hurt your brain that much. This a week before Christmas, I took our one of our three dogs to be cryopreserved. I took it up to Cryonics Institute. Her name was Hermione. We showed a picture around here. Anyway, Hermione is a sweet dog, and I will talk about her in the past tense, but there's a pretty good chance she's not in the past tense. Basically, it was I put her in the plane with me. We flew up to the Cryonics Institute. Two in the morning, I was driving a rented car through a snowstorm to get to the Cryonics Institute. Got to the veterinary clinic where I was literally 5 minutes from CI. Tremendous service levels at CI. There's a really caring, compassionate people. Here's the point related to this. So the dog literally dies in my arms. They bring a little injection, and the dog dies, and within seconds she's being cooled down. It was a very, quite frankly, it may have been one of the best cryopreservations in the history of time. I don't think even other pets have gotten that good at cryopreservation, much less humans. So basically, until when we can do humans, when we can have the same kind of compassion and intelligence that we deal with our pets, we'll certainly get better cryopreservations. But we can't wait. Don't wait to sign up till that day. But it's nice to know that the life insurance policies we sell will pay even if you suicide. That coverage that you have, Stephen, on you, if it's past 2 years, you can suicide and your policy will still pay out the full death benefit.
I do want to warn.
That is a selling point that I
Yeah,
don't
and
want
I
to
want to
push.
warn people against that too, because unless it's one of those doctor-assisted suicide things, in some states there's mandatory autopsy laws if someone commits a suicide.
Oh.
Which would mean you cannot be preserved at all.
Yeah, great point, Enosh. And I'm not suggesting people suicide as a general matter. Of course, I'm simply saying that when assisted suicide does become more of an option, that will not be a stopper on the death benefit being paid out. But thank you for that cautionary observation. You're absolutely right. One of the reasons you don't want to suicide if you're a cryonicist is that it's mandatory autopsy in most states. So. Don't be stupid. Be smart.
It's interesting. Now that you mentioned it, because I feel for you, and I know that was a tough day with Hermione. We put a cat down. Geez, would have been 3 or 4, 5 years ago, maybe not quite that long. And it's tragic and heartbreaking. And she is the opposite of preserved. She's in her ashes are in a small box above our fireplace.
I respectfully
but
suggest
it just brought
that
to
won't
mind-
grow back.
That's right. Unfortunately, she's annihilated from the universe, which is terrible to think about. But this is just pure, like, we occasionally tangent on this show. I wonder why the cocktail they give you when you have a physician-assisted suicide in Colorado can take hours, but the shot that they give inmates in death row and that they give pets, I'm sure it's different shots for pets and inmates, but those ones take 30 seconds, if that. I wonder why. I wonder what the difference is and why one gets the long one and one gets the short one. Although actually, I do know that part of it, the cocktail in the, and I'm sure I could look up the recipe for what they give you in the physician-assisted suicide. I know that there's large amounts of opiates. You're not laying there in pain for hours. It's if anything a controlled opiate death. So.
I don't think they're worried about addiction at that point. But yeah, that is an interesting question.
No, that wasn't the thing I was making. I was just making sure that it was clear that these people weren't laying there in agony as their organs are being destroyed. They were riding an opium high.
It was probably the best they felt in a long time.
So Jess,
I want to make sure
it's as humane as possible.
Jess, you had a question or observation.
Yeah, trying to regenerate it. I was wondering if you knew the origin of, or you or Eniash, the required autopsy if you commit suicide.
I don't actually know, but I assumed that it was because suicides can often be faked, that it was actually murder, and they want to rule that out.
That's my guess.
Mine as well.
Oh, I guess so.
And again, if I paid a death claim on a suicide, but it was 6 months after the 2-year exclusion, the suicide clause expired. So basically, if it would have been inside that 2 years, the insurance company would have simply paid all the premium back, but they would not have paid the claim. So if it's remarkable that after 2 years, insurance companies do pay on suicide. A lot of folks do not realize that. With reference to the question about the autopsy, obviously an autopsy is one of the things you want to avoid. As part of your Cryonics paperwork, there's an option to basically say I'm a religious objector to autopsy, so that it reduces.
I checked that box too, and I felt vaguely dirtied by doing it.
Because you ain't that religious, you heathen.
I like to
Right. Well, that's the thing, is it would be nice to say I'm a conscientious objector or I'm an informed person who's opting out, but there isn't a legal form like that. There's a legal form that says, for religious reasons, I don't want an autopsy.
I like to think of my rationalism. Not everyone, obviously, but me personally, as almost a sort of religious aspect, the way it guides my life. So I didn't feel as bad. I was like, there are people who call themselves religious that check this box that have far less knowledge about the philosophy that is supposedly guiding their life, right? They're just like, oh yeah, I'm Christian, or oh yeah, I'm Jewish, and they don't do anything with that in their lives. Whereas I actually know what my philosophy entails, and it guides my life in certain ways. So I was like, I'm more religious than those punks. So sure, why not?
Absolutely. How about you, Jess? What's your religious feelings or feelings about religion? There's a rabbit trail we could go down for a long time.
Save me, Jess. Rationality isn't a religion.
Well, I was going to say maybe transhumanism.
Yeah, that's there's a whole lot of smart things we could say about religion. It's not a surprise to any of your listeners. I'm sure, Stephen, that most people signed up for Cryonics are not just skeptical of the claims of religion. Most of us think it's one of the worst ideas that's ever come down the pike. The idea of believing things without good reason is faith should be the new F word. We should use it as it's an embarrassment that intelligent, educated humans still are placing a high premium on something that is so obviously bad as believing something without good reason.
I got a question about if anything's changed in the past 8 years, and I guess also sort of a advisory notice to anyone else listening to this. People who might have been your next of kin, someone who may have been able to inherit your stuff, whether it be children or parents or brothers or a spouse, can sometimes dispute claims, life insurance claims or whatever. And I know there's been at least a few cryonic preservations which have been completely screwed up because somebody's greedy ass kid or spouse said the institute should absolutely not get this money. This money should come to me, and it goes to court, and the body is just put in a drawer somewhere, and you're screwed. So the paperwork in CI said very specifically, hey, this isn't a requirement, but everybody should talk to their next of kin, their family, tell them, this is what I want. It should not be a surprise to anyone. And if you can at all, get them to sign on, not to sign on, but to at least say, you know what, I love you and I respect your wishes, and I will not stand in the way of this. Because you want people to know that like, this is important to you. This is not desecrating your corpse. This is what you want done. And they have to kind of be on board with that if you don't want legal challenges. I was wondering, do you know, has anything changed in that regard? Is there more legal protections for us? Or is this still...
Enosh, bless your heart for bringing that up. That is a really, really important point, and I want to, emphasize that whole section there. If I can just kind of summarize some of the things you made reference to there. One is the relatives affidavit. Both Alcor and CI have a document that they don't actually require that you have your relative sign. They think it's simply a good idea, and they do everything they can do to encourage you. But basically, the relatives sign off saying, yes, I understand that my brother is going to be cryopreserved. So it's not a big secret. They don't fight it. But the other component is how in the world you structure things so that they can't do it. Basically, the way we structure things, you cannot your relatives cannot fuck it up. Excuse my language. The basically, here's why. Life insurance has some really unique components. One of these is by operation of law, the money goes directly to the named beneficiary, does not pass go, does not collect $200, does not go to any potential litigants. It avoids probate, basically, which is a part where litigants can jump on it. So which does not mean it's not possible to still mess things up. But what we do is structure the life insurance policy to where it goes direct, the beneficiary goes direct to the Cryonics organization, and we also structure it in a way that the family understands if they contest, they are not likely to get anything. We put verbiage in the trust and verbiage in the process that says basically, if you contest this, if you do not cooperate, if you do not make the appropriate call, you are not going to be getting my estate or assets. So there's two components to that. One is the fact that life insurance proceeds go direct to the named beneficiary and are not subject to creditors. And two is the fact that if both the Alcor and CI paperwork have some verbiage that basically states if my family does not cooperate, they are hereby basically cut off. Now that's not completely enforceable in all states. That's verbiage that I've been talking with the attorney I'm working with. I'm working with an attorney who basically, her and I are writing the book on Cryonics estate planning. It's the second book, and it's called the Cryonics Estate Planning Handbook. Maybe you can take it with you. And it's on this exact issue, basically. How do you make sure that your family, one, doesn't slop it up, and two, if Cryonics does work, how can you wake up stone wealthy? So it's another issue. It's a whole new rabbit trail to go down. But some people may be thinking, hey, this thing really works. Would it be possible to not just maybe wake up poor? It'd be nice to wake up with a whole lot of options. So yeah, there's a whole lot of questions about that, but some of us have been working about 20 years to try to put together Cryonics trust arrangements that sidestep laws against perpetuities, that sidestep family people who might try to slop it up or take your money, that have a corporate trustee whose job it is to protect and grow your wealth over time, so that if Cryonics works, you can wake up with a lot of money. That's an interesting idea. That's why I have one reason I have $3 million of life insurance on me. These Cryonics trust, again, you could have without being wealthy, just like you can be signed up for Cryonics without being wealthy. You use a life insurance policy to fund the trust. Is that cool or what?
Yeah, I mean, it
this.
assumes that money will still be a thing in the future, but it might be.
Yes, that's a reasonable question, and I promise you that is something that we talk about at length in the book. And I think some form of money is, and I could be wrong, but some of us would rather think, some form of resource allocation is inevitable in any society.
I think I'd rather assume that money is still going to be a thing.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable and safe assumption.
Because if it's not, then you're probably fine anyway.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I know. I know.
When in doubt, bet on things staying the same.
Yes, or at least that the human nature staying the same, and human nature basically is avaricious. Human nature also, we clearly are all leading lives that are so much wealthier than most people have lived throughout eons. Yet most of us don't feel like we quote have enough. We still envy the person who's got 14 computer screens instead of 12.
Yeah.
So, it's not rational. I'm not saying we're not saying humans are rational. I'm saying, well, humans are humans. And the point being, it'd be nice to have some options. Wouldn't it be nice if you can find a way to buy a new set of lungs to let you breathe water?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you want to have a nice little DNA thing that lets you grow wings so you can fly around. I suspect that may take some money. I could be wrong, but it sure be nice to have a couple $1 billion to throw at the problem. And with my $3 million of life insurance in a Cryonics trust, it grows to about $1 billion in just 66 years at a reasonable growth rate.
So we have been going a bit over an hour. We should probably wrap it up here soon.
That works for me.
Stephen, Jess, either of you have any questions or comments for Rudi?
I've got one if you're Since I can't see if you're thinking a thought, Jess, do you have one, or do you want me to
I
go?
have one. You can go first.
No, you go ahead. Mine's probably more ridiculous.
Oh no.
We say the most ridiculous for last, Stephen. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
Your question will be perfect, Jess.
I have one that's, I think, a legit question, but also a very silly one, which is, what is the benefits to freezing your whole body versus just your head?
Oh, that's not a silly question at all. That's a question that cryonicists argue about ad infinitum. I'm signed up for full body. I'm happy to disclose my bias there. I think it's a well informed bias, and here's why. At one time there was Alcor, matter of fact, still has some legacy data on their website saying that you can get better cryopreservation with neuro only. And at one time that was the logistics that had to do with perfusion and molarity concentrations of cryoprotective agents, so they couldn't access the carotids and properly get you your brain cryoperfused if you're doing a full body. But now they can. That's the new cryoprotective agent is not as viscous at cold temperatures, and the mechanics of the perfusing process mean we can get full molarity of CPA in the head, even a full body cryopreservation. But the other component there is there's a pretty good, none of us have a chance to interview somebody who's used to walking ahead. So we can't say, hey, do you feel like you're still you? There's a pretty good chance that our sense of self may be in our, as well in our spine or torso. Even those of us who believe and who are hardcore materialists and think we're mostly in our brain pattern. My clients who are neurologists and brain scientists are all signed up for full body because they tell me that my brain parts go down to my toes. So all that's my rationale for a full body is a better option. If they don't need that body, they can throw it away, but I'd rather send more information forward. Is that responsive?
I guess I was even thinking about things like gut bacteria, which are also a part of it.
Yeah, great point. Or my microbiome clearly, hey, I want those trillions of gut biomes to come forward with me.
Do they also get cryopreserved?
I think they probably would. They tell me there's a whole lot more of those than their human cells. Yeah, it's a great point. But yeah, so it's not. By the way, CI does not give you an option. CI is full body. Period. There's also a yuck factor that is.
Just like the aesthetics
to deal with.
bothers people.
Yes,
they don't want to be
cutting people's head off is exactly. Most to put Gramps' head in a jar is a bridge too far for a whole lot of people. Whereas freezing a whole body, I think, has a lot less societal pushback, and that's another reason why I think it's a smarter direction forward for cryonics as a whole. But I still am happy to write people who choose to be neuro only. But my bias is for the full body, and I think there's good reasons for that.
I think it's good PR for the company too. Certainly, yeah, like you said, you picture a beheading and then the process. I think people get kind of shy about that.
I'm sorry, it's yucky. I mean, I'm a signed up cryonicist for 27 years, and it's still a little bit yucky to me. And if it's yucky to me, I know it's yucky to a lot of other people.
Right. Yeah. I feel a sense of kinship with my meat suit as well, such as it is. So I'll keep that and then upgrade or modify as needed after the fact. That's my expectation anyway. I guess I wanted to end on and of course whatever last sales pitch you'd like to do. RudiHoffman.com. Everyone be sure to remember that. But what's your best? Maybe your best and what's your upper and lower bound estimate for the likelihood of cryonics working? I think that's a catching point for a lot of people. They hear, well, sure, but then these 10 things would have to go right, and that sounds like way too improbable. And I'm like, well, even if you're fairly pessimistic on all of them, that's still like 8 to 10%. But that's my own guess. So, or not guess, my own best informed Bayesian estimate. But what would you say yours is?
Yeah, that speculation is certainly a really great question. As a matter of fact, I'm actually working on. You've heard of the Drake equation. I'm sure your well-informed listeners are familiar with the Drake equation, which took a whole lot of variables and multiplied them out and then figured out, to get a result. There's a lot of things that have to work well for cryonics to work, but there's a lot of things that have to work well for the people hearing these words to work. And you think about the amount of things in the chain, the amount of components that enable the conversation that we're having right now. It's incredible, but human beings are clever and we can put things together. The odds of my cryopreservation working, I'll speak personally, I think they're reasonably high. I'm going to give it over like 40 or 50%. And that's because I work really hard to make sure I do get a good cryopreservation. I don't take existential risks. My wife is not only signed up but fully supportive. Everyone I know knows that I'm a cryonicist. I wear my bracelet all the time. I have a pretty good sense that if I were to get sick, I would know exactly where to go. And that at least covers the logistics component. There's other variables that have to work together. Yes, we know that. I think it's certainly better than 10%. If it's a 1% chance, it's still an incredible option. And if it works right now, if it makes you feel better that I've done everything I can rationally do, I suspect those who are listening to these words are really smart, highly educated, super rational beings who are trying to make the best decision they can about this thing called death. It's the big one. It doesn't get any bigger than this. This is a life or death decision. You're making this instant as you listen to these words. And I suspect even if there's a reasonable chance of a 1% or 5% or 0.01% or 0.0001% of cryonics working, and you could afford it, you should give it a shot and check this thing out. So in addition, you could put cryonics if you forget RudiHoffman.com, hit cryonics or cryonics funding. Basically, you'll pop up cryonics organizations, and you'll pop up my name. I score pretty high on this stuff. So hopefully that is a good wrap-up sentence and a wrap-up idea. Basically, the odds are unknown, but if you don't sign up, the odds are 100% it won't work. Is that pretty?
I like that.
Is that a strong
I think
close?
That was good. I think so.
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm a closer. Hey, you guys have been
awesome.
Wonderful. You guys have been. I really enjoyed this, and I hope the people listening have found some value in this. And again, you can pop onto Amazon for affordableimmortal.com. Do the download. I'll pay your $3 if you don't like it.
All right.
And
All right.
let's put this thing in the can. You tell us how to handle it from here, Stephen.
Sounds good. Well, we'll wrap this part up. And once again, thanks again, Rudi. This was great. And I've been shilling for you and for Cryonics for years. This isn't me just being nice because you're on the air. I've been this way every time the subject comes up for the last several years.
Well, thank you.
It is my own best faith assessment. I know Eneasz managed to get this together without a life insurance agent who was on board. He basically just had to push everything himself. When I contacted you, you said, "Here, yeah, let's set you up with a policy," and that was it. I got some paperwork through the mail and had to sign it. I never had to think about it again. Like this is a fairly easy process if you get the right people, and the only right person I know is Rudi Hoffman. So
thank you very much. We really do absolutely do our best to make it as seamless as possible. Thank you very much.
All right.
Well, awesome.
Thank you for joining us. This has been
Great.
really
Well, thanks
informative.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And Jess, thank you. And Stephen, thank you. Have a wonderful evening and good luck and stay safe and sequestered out there, everybody.
You too.
Will do.
We sure will.
Night,
All right.
everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
All right.
I'm not sure if I should say welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy again. We have reconvened a few days later, and
Welcome back to the Bayesian
Yes.
Conspiracy.
all the people who paused and waited a couple of days to be in sync with us.
We appreciate it. Your dedication to the show is noted.
Heck yeah! And now we are going to be doing the sequences. Yes.
Yes.
I believe so.
That's what
Excellent.
I'm told. Of course, I could have missed it. Maybe there was some illusion of transparency going on.
Well, I mean, we were the ones who told us, so we can change things if we don't want to be telling us like this anymore. But I think this is a good thing to do, so let's do it.
Also, I was trying to make it a segue, but it didn't really
Yeah, no,
land.
I got it.
Illusion. And thank you. Yeah, I get one chuckle a week, and I can survive.
That was more of a smirk-worthy joke. Yeah, so we had some good ones this time. Illusion of transparency, which, and then expecting short inferential distances, and I feel like they actually would have been really good ones.
Please, hold up just 1 second. Aren't we
Are we on?
doing, what was it? Is the molecular technology scientific and scientific evidence, legal evidence, rational evidence? Am I
Not
completely
according
off
to the
base?
website.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Should we maybe.
We'll chop that. But no worries.
No, I mean, should we maybe like reconvene a different day? If we're
I can't. If this is going on on Wednesday,
really?
I record We Want More tomorrow night. That takes from like usually 6 to 9. So,
Crap. You know what? No. I've read both of these a number of times. I know them all. Let's keep going.
all right, you got it.
Yeah, so I was saying that we have some good ones this time. Illusion of Transparency and Expecting Short Inferential Distances, both of which would have been really good to go along with Talking to Strangers, especially Illusion of Transparency. It's very much in line with the major themes of that book. Someone want to summarize it, or shall I go?
I think you're doing a great job so far. Go for it.
Okay, so Illusion of Transparency. In hindsight bias, which was the previous one, people who know the outcome of a situation believe that the outcome should have been easy to predict in advance. So related to this one is the illusion of transparency, which is we always know what we mean by our words, and we expect that others know too. I think I've also heard this called mind reading. I forget if that's from... I think that's a thought distortion on the list of like the CBT skills.
It also just sounds like a popular nomenclature for like this thing, right?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to read your mind? I meant this when I said that, and the standard rejoinder is, how am I supposed to read your mind? You know, when all I could hear is what you said.
Yeah. Now that's well, I kind of want to dig into it more, but I'll keep summarizing. There was an example in here. So June recommends a restaurant to Mark. Mark dines there and discovers A, unimpressive food and mediocre service, or B, delicious food and impeccable service. Then Mark leaves the following message on June's answering machine. June, I just finished dinner at the restaurant you recommended, and I must say it was marvelous, just marvelous. And so this was a scenario that was presented to a group of subjects. And
I'm trying not to laugh. Sorry, it's a funny situation.
I know. Marvelous, just marvelous is a phrase that I should use more in my life. So,
I think that'd be marvelous, just marvelous.
when this was presented to a group of subjects, 59% thought Mark's message was sarcastic, and that Jane would perceive the sarcasm, importantly. And among the other subjects, told scenario B, which, by the way, they're saying the ones who were told that he had unimpressive food thought that it was sarcastic and that Jane would perceive this sarcasm. And Jane, there's a typo. Maybe we should report it. Apparently, Jane and June are used interchangeably in this.
Oh.
But anyway.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, the subjects that were told scenario B, that he received great service and food, only 3% thought that Jane would perceive Mark's message as sarcastic. The study seemed to indicate that an actual voice message was played back to the subjects, which I guess is not clear. It seemed to indicate. And that makes it more surprising, though, that people could get such different impressions from a voice recording.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it would be very important that it is a voice recording, because if it was just written down, you could, imagine the tone of voice to be whatever you wanted. But if there was an actual voice recording, everyone hears the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this, and it's illustrating a point that we don't necessarily have to generalize too much from this, the specific example, just because it's, one study and all that. But this general phenomena stands with or without this study. But as far as this goes, too, large parts of like whether or not I'd assume he's being sarcastic would be my priors on Mark's usual like behavior, if he's a sarcastic person, if he's the kind of person who's ever used the word marvelous before, little things like that. But yeah, I think the gist is that if the group was told, hey, look, he's being sarcastic, or rather that the food is bad, they assume that he's being sarcastic. And of course they would assume that they know that he believes the food was bad, but that they also believe Jane would perceive the sarcasm. And so what I like about this too is this was done in 1994. if you run that into text messages today, you get to just go completely hog wild with this.
Yeah. What emoji did they put? That's why it's really important to use emoji.
Is that a sarcastic wink or a serious wink?
Yeah.
There was another study he cites from 2002, which I thought was even more interesting because they told a person to say an ambiguous sentence to an audience. I think one of the examples given was the man is chasing a woman on a bicycle, and the speaker is given a picture to show that it's a man running after a woman, that the woman is on the bicycle, as opposed to like the woman is running and the man is on the bicycle. But when you first hear it, it could be interpreted either way. Anyways, they were told to say the sentence to an audience and estimate how much of the audience understood what they were saying. And they always overestimated how many people understood them and underestimated how many people misunderstood them. And like I thought that was extra interesting because then the speaker had full control over how they would utter the sentence, right? And they're looking at the audience, so maybe they're getting some kind of feedback from them, but they still just were wrong guessing on how many people actually understood them.
Yeah, and as we know from talking to strangers, you can't even trust what feedback you're getting from the audience.
Yeah.
So if you want to test this at home with your friends, I forget if I even heard this from the Lost Wrong community or somewhere else, but if you tap your finger on the table to like the tune of Happy Birthday or the Star Spangled Banner or some tune that you would expect people to know, and then ask them what song was that, nobody will know. It'll sound exactly like, I don't know, Jingle Bells to You or whatever, but it's
just random tapping.
A good example.
I remember Julia Gaylor mentioning that once, like 5 years ago on Rationally Speaking, and I never forgot that. It's another good example of like, no, like this couldn't be more clear. I'm clearly doing Happy Birthday, and they're like, I don't know, man, you're tapping your fucking fingers. Is that AC/DC? Like,
okay. This is going to be a spoiler for Harry Potter Methods of Rationality. So if you haven't read it, skip forward 2 minutes. But Eliezer intended it to be incredibly obvious whether or not Quirrell was Voldemort, like he was in canon. And I'm not going to say if he is or not for people who didn't skip forward, but it is not at all incredibly obvious to the point where the community was, the readership at the time he was writing, was very much split as to whether or not Quirrell was Voldemort until the reveal was made later on near the end of the book. And like to Eliezer, he was just like, how are people not getting it? This is the most obvious thing in the world. There shouldn't even be a discussion.
In all of our defense, even if it was obvious, which I maintain that it was less obvious than he thought it was, but part of the reason for that is because, like, if anything, it was too obvious.
Yeah, it was
and
telegraphed.
There's no way it would be laid out that clearly if that's really what was going on here.
I agree, but it's a thing that happens a lot with writing, where you think the audience is going to get something and they don't, and then you overcorrect and like really overexplain things, and people are like, "Don't spill it out like I'm an idiot." I can read into the text a little bit. It's a very difficult line to walk.
Yeah, that's why beta readers are really important.
Yep.
That's what I'm appreciating a lot about wrapping up Ward right now, is that the author has, to tie all these loose ends together, and I think do it to the satisfaction of the raging mob. And the mob, at least the only mob that I see and listen to, which is like the subreddit and the Discord, they are, it's hard to summarize, but they are much more like you picture mobby than like Reddit, where Reddit will just like, is happy just to fling shit across the fence. They'd be like, haha, this sucked or whatever. These ones will jump down your throat and be like, I can't believe you would say that, you would put heroic sacrifice on this pedestal. Really, it's just like suicide, and that's terrible, and this is awful. This shouldn't be, lauded or whatever. I can't, and Brian brought this up in the last couple of episodes, if we want more, like having to write in front of an audience that is dissecting your work while it's in progress, I think would add a whole new dimension to it.
I can't even do it when I'm just trying to like have an imaginary audience. I end up second guessing myself. I'm like, is this too dark? Am I talking down to my audience right now? Is this going to be, I don't know.
the post ends on a real world example with huge consequences, where 2 days before Germany attacked Poland, just kicking off World War II, Chamberlain sent a letter that was intended to make it clear Britain would fight any invasion that occurred. But it was phrased politely and in diplomatic speak, and Hitler thought it was conciliatory. So the tanks rolled right in.
Those polite Brits.
Yeah. So yeah, the main lesson from this post seems to be when you have something in your head, you may think things are very obvious, but they are not necessarily in any way obvious.
They very much are not.
The best thing about that is that you can never really be sure someone actually understood you. Like, the premise at the top of this is like, nobody knows, like, you know what you meant to say by your words and expect others to know it too. Sometimes if you're not 100% sure what you meant, then like that's obvious that the person, you know, probably won't know what you meant if you didn't. But even if you do, and they tell you back in words that make sense to you, you might have this kind of like double illusion of transparency, but that is like way less obvious than a like literal double illusion of transparency where, you know, I just didn't communicate exactly as clear as I thought, and then you repeated my miscommunication to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. This can kind of go on to this weird recursive level that to me is just kind of fun and wild to chase down. But
well, there's two.
It is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's two different frameworks that I'm thinking of just off the top of my head, where people try to mitigate this effect. One is the CFAR's double crux communication style, where, and then yeah, there's also the Gottman-Rappaport intervention, which is a relationship counseling thing. And they both have the same kind of structure where one person speaks, the other listens, the other person has to repeat back what the other person said, but in their own words. Or like, what I'm hearing is that you feel like this, and that's making you feel that way, and I can see that you're upset about this by like your expression, is that right? And you're not allowed to move forward until you feel convinced that the other person understands you. Like you feel like their ability to rephrase it back to you is, yeah, that's what I meant to say. Or I think with the double crux example, it's supposed to be like even kind of a steel man where it's like, yeah, that's even better than what I was trying to say. I guess that's the ideal version.
Yeah, that was in Rappaport's rules of like civil discourse or something. One of the 4 rules was you should be able to repeat back your opponent's argument in such terms that they say, wow, I wish I'd thought to put it that way. Mm. And I feel like if you get to do that is the apex of having a good conversation with somebody you disagree with. It shows, at the very least, that you understand them well enough to simulate what they're trying to say, and that means you're prepared to engage them. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's also, although I've tried to have these kinds of conversations, and it takes a lot of practice, and it's very unnatural. First of all, it makes any conversation take like a million times as long, so it's the reason why people don't just speak like that all the time.
Right.
I think, I don't know.
Well, and the other reason, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that I tried to do, which I've talked about before, is the radical honesty thing of, especially with people close to me, that, you know, there's less inferential distance. It's like a segue.
I was going to do the segue too, yeah, but I wasn't going to use that one. I was going to say that I think that would work to resolve confusions like Mark and Jane were having about the restaurant, right? Because you could trust that Mark would accurately represent how he felt about the restaurant, rather than like, is he joking? Yeah,
like, is Mark a guy who's sarcastic all the time, or does he never make jokes? But most people are kind of in the middle of that. I don't know. I like to use radical honesty, say things clearly and bluntly, as much as possible.
Totally. And some of the times the reason that we can suspect that short conversation will suffice for a long conversation is necessary because we expect short inferential distances.
Yeah, we should.
Can you believe I didn't write that down first? That was a good joke. I could hear the audience laughing, even if Eneasz. All right, there, finally, cracked a grin. All right.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. There must be a long delay between when I'm doing things to when you're seeing them.
No, I'm giving you guys a hard time. That wasn't an uproarious laughter joke. Anyway, expecting short inferential distances is one of the ones I didn't have to reread, but I did just because it stuck with me really well when I first read it. The short version is that basically, when you're explaining something to somebody, you have a well-grounded intuition that a short explanation will suffice. Because in our ancestral environment, short explanations were all that was necessary because we all basically had all the same prior knowledge. Whereas now, if you're trying to make a nuanced point in a difficult subject and you give a short answer, like a tweet, it's extremely reasonable to understand that somebody, or to expect now that someone will completely misunderstand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like he gives the example that since you grew up in bands of no more than like 200 people maybe, all knowledge was passed down by speech or memory, and so like no one was that far removed from you in knowledge. If you discovered a new oasis, you didn't have to explain what an oasis is or why it's a good idea to drink water or anything. Like almost everyone knew almost everything that everyone else knew. There was not a lot of distance between you and other people that you had to bridge. And now we have what he calls abstract disciplines with vast bodies of carefully gathered evidence, generalized into elegant theories, transmitted by written books. Their conclusions are 100 inferential steps removed from universally shared background premises.
Yeah, we have really intense specialization and everything.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry to interrupt that, but I wanted to get that out real quick before you went to the why something that's more than one inferential step away seems to be crazy or lies or something.
No, you're good. I brought up Twitter because it's always I'm not on Twitter, but I see tweets once in a while on Reddit, or I'll hear about the fallout sometimes. I don't know if Dawkins uses Twitter less or if he's just slightly less insane on there, but for a while he was just totally tanking his reputation, I think, by trying to have nuanced arguments in 140 characters. And now they've upped it, I think, to 280, so he was able to get out the whole sentence like, there's every reason to expect that eugenics would work from a scientific perspective, but that doesn't mean that we should do it or something. And
yeah, well, the thing is, like with Dawkins and with a lot of people, they just assume everyone knows basically the same thing that he knows.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point.
I'm speaking to an audience of my fellow scientists here, right? And it turns out, no, with Twitter, you're speaking to literally everyone.
Yeah.
And most of them don't have that knowledge.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's nothing scientifically controversial about the fact that it would be super easy to breed in traits into people if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah.
If aliens visited Earth tomorrow and said, if humanity on average isn't a foot taller in 2 centuries, we will blow up your planet, that would be not, it would be an inconvenience. It would be hard, but it wouldn't be difficult. It wouldn't
be literally impossible. I'm not going to say that it would be like super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, right. So it might not be. It would be definitely an inconvenience, but it's not like we would have no idea how to address this challenge, right?
Yeah.
It would be totally doable. I'm not hung up on the eugenics thing. It's a very loaded word.
Yeah.
It was the idea that I think of is it always seems like Twitter people have they try to make a nuanced point. That's what I was on Twitter for like one summer, and I got to arguing with somebody about female and male genital mutilation, and I realized that we were just talking past each other and that it was impossible to have a conversation. I'm like, this is the worst platform ever for talking to people. Why am I here? And then you get on there for like Twitter. Yeah, movie reviews, jokes, I think is the absolute platform for it. You can get great one-liners and zingers on Twitter. I think that's a great place for it. But as for the rest of it, meh.
Twitter was a fun social experiment that we did with the world. And I guess
I'm not sure fun is the term I would use.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I worked as a social media manager for a bit, and that was just like the worst 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an exaggeration. I have had worse things happen than having to be on Twitter, but it was up there.
Yeah.
Just like the inanity.
Yeah, so to go back to the post, it says that in the ancestral environment, anyone who said something with no obvious support was either a liar or an idiot, because there was no knowledge that everyone else in the band didn't already have.
Or couldn't easily get.
Yeah. And conversely, if you say something that you think is blatantly obvious and the other person doesn't see it, then that other person is an idiot, or they're being deliberately obstinate just to annoy you. And on top of all that, if someone says something with no obvious support and expects you to believe it and gets all indignant when you don't, then they must be totally crazy. So the issue of not having this common ground between each other is, a recipe for horribleness, because listeners still assume that everything should be visible with one step, maybe two, so they take 2 steps back to explain, maybe 3 on the outside, and not realizing just how much distance there is from universal knowledge to new knowledge.
So this is so many professors, or just probably teachers in general, but I remember in college there would be like the sign of a good professor is somebody who understands inferential distance. I think a lot of teachers, like good teachers who care about the teaching process, are really skilled at this too. Like that's probably the field where you need to know it the most. Any field maybe where you're the main thing you're trying to do is communicate something to an audience that's unfamiliar with it. But I remember just having really bad professors who are they start their PowerPoint, you're like, okay, you're taking notes in the first slide, like, all right, I'm following, wait, what? The next slide is just completely like, and then there's this vector thing. And I remember I started out majoring in environmental science. I had this professor who did that sort of thing. I have a page of notes, like before I dropped that major and switched to art for like a bunch of reasons. But like there was a page of notes that was just it like slowly devolved into a bunch of doodles. And I remember Vector Kitty was flying over the environment, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't have no idea what's even going on anymore. something.
Totally. Yeah, I think it was the worst teachers were the ones that didn't remember what it was like to not know the subject they're teaching.
Yeah.
And so they start talking, and to them, it's they've been doing it for 30 years, and like, yeah, this is old hat. I get this. You guys will get it too because it's really easy. But they don't remember 30 years ago when they're opening their first textbook, right?
Dude, it's surprising how quickly that sets in. Because so taking just a stupid video game as an example, in World of Warcraft, you have to learn boss fights. There's all these little mechanics you got to do, things you got to watch out for. It takes some practice, right? And before you have it down, it's freaking hard as hell. You're learning all these new patterns and tricks and things to watch out for. But once you have it down, it is super easy. It is barely an inconvenience, as they say. And so once people have beaten bosses and moved on to other bosses, all the time you see people saying, how is anybody stuck on this earlier boss? They're super easy. You just kind of blow through it. And like literally maybe 2 weeks ago, they were in the position of, oh my God, this is impossible. How will we ever do this? Because it's, everything is impossible until you know how to do it. And then it's just trivially easy.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly you can flip from one to the other.
That's really hard it's hard to get in that mindset when you're a new learner as well. That's something that I've kind of been reading about and struggling with. Like when you're an adult and you're trying to learn a new skill, it's really hard to be in the position of, I'm an idiot who knows nothing about this, like, I don't know, programming or art. I'm trying to teach art to people, and I think the sequence actually gets into this too, but the teacher also can get really frustrated with people who don't understand what seem like basic concepts to you. But like, there are things that seem like basic concepts to me because I learned them when I was a kid. Like I've been drawing forever.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to teach like some older folks at the library, like, okay, like here's how you draw a face, and not understand. Like that's another thing that's really funny. Describing the anatomy of a face was like, okay, you have to like, you do the oval, you divide the oval in half, that's where the eyes go, your eyes are halfway down your head. And like, that seems, I'm trying to explain like the cognitive things going on, I'm like, this seems unintuitive because most people look at faces and they don't look at the rest of the head. So
yeah.
you think the upper third of the face has the eyes, but actually it's the middle of the head. You have to draw the whole head, that this part's covered with hair, no one looks at that part. But like, even as I'm describing all this stuff and I'm trying to like go step by step as slow as I possibly can, I'm walking around the room and people are still drawing the eyes on the top of the forehead. And I'm like, no. Bad.
She's like, look at me.
Bad human.
Where are my eyes? Are you going to put them up here? How weird would that look, right? Yeah, just bring it down. Yeah, I think, I imagine, part of it, that sounds to me that just sounds like a hard subject. Since I can't draw. Maybe I'd be a good art student because I know I suck at it, but I wouldn't be confident in my ability to do it right. Whereas other people, the part where it could be maddening. He uses the example a lot of like scientists trying to explain things to non-scientists, and how like simplest explanation is a magic word of power among scientists because they've been inculcated with the legendary history of science from Newton to Einstein, and it's like, so you hear a biologist say, "Oh, it's the simplest explanation." Then a physicist who doesn't know biology can be like, "Oh, okay, I will add a lot of credence to that because we are also scientists."
They know how important that is.
Yeah, and so that's like the annoying part is when you give like a long explanation of something to somebody who's not in the field that you're propounding from. You know, evolution to a layperson might be a good example. Like you can explain everything, and they're like, "Okay, yeah, I think I'm following you. I think you're an idiot. I think you're wrong." It's like, okay, well then you weren't listening and you didn't follow because this couldn't be simpler, and you're the idiot. So that's not how I feel. I'm saying that inclination to feel that way makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's like very much. I think you get in this headspace easily of this person's an idiot and they're not listening to me, and the other person is thinking like this person thinks I'm an idiot and that I don't know like basic stuff. Because like the thing about drawing is that people think they know how to draw a face, and like, you know, even kids with crayons are usually drawing faces, and it's like I know how to do like eyes, nose, and mouth, you know, like come on, but like you don't. It's just so hard to get in that headspace. It's like actually you don't know this stuff.
Yeah,
you have to be really humble.
He says in the post that to a lay audience, it's the simplest explanation may be interesting, but that's hardly a knockdown argument. But from the biologist's perspectives, they can see how, you know, it might sound a little unintuitive, but when they reject evolution, even after they've had it explained to them that it's the simplest explanation, they're just idiots, and there's no point talking to them.
And it's clear, too, that this isn't what Eliezer means here either. He's saying that that's the feeling that one gets because they're expecting short differential distances. Yeah. When you correct for that, then you no longer view the unable to follow you along layperson as an idiot. You're like, okay, I clearly didn't actually explain myself. That's why Richard Dawkins' book explaining evolution is, I don't know, 350 pages long and not 5. To somebody who has and even that, it could be twice as long if you wanted to explain. He probably does a bit. It's been years since I've read it, but like if you wanted to explain little things like here's why we value short explanations. Here's why we value replication. All of the foundations of science. If you wanted to dig into all of that, then the book could be much longer. But I think he probably does a bit. This is meant to be a top to bottom book. But that's my point. Is like you can explain evolution in 3 minutes, if not less, depending on who you're talking to. But if you're starting from scratch from somebody who has no idea what you're talking about, then sometimes you need 300 pages, right?
Yeah. I have a. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
The joys of Skype.
Yeah. Okay, well, then I guess I was going to say that he also says that if people see you visibly attaching greater weight to an argument than is justified in the eyes of the audience at that time, then they also think you're crazy because, you shouldn't put that amount of weight on that evidence. So you have to go back and first explain why the evidence that you're about to explain is as weighty and important as you're about to, lay out with, and that takes explanation in itself. And so he's saying there's a very long chain, but you can't drop any hints that maybe you're working a dozen inferential steps away from the audience, or that you have special knowledge they don't, because then they think that you're condescending and arrogant.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, trying to explain to somebody why astrology isn't a thing. And if somehow she believes in astrology, but we shared everything else in common, I could just be like, you realize every physicist on Earth thinks that it's bullshit, or knows that, would bet their lives on it being bullshit. You would immediately change your mind. You're like, okay, if all the physicists who actually know everything there is to know about stars, or everything that humanity can know yet so far about stars, thinks that it doesn't, that the constellations don't impact my life, then I guess I'm wrong.
I think if I were to actually believe in astrology, I would first have to not know enough of physics to not care what the physicists think.
I don't know. People are really good at compartmentalizing.
I know. Well, once you know that stars are giant gas balls and that they're so freaking far away, what else is there to know?
People are very good at compartmentalizing. I have religious coworkers who, spend their days like bioengineering cells.
Oh, God.
Don't these bioengineered cells look intelligently designed? It's like, yes, because we made them here in the lab. Fuck you. It's not the same, and you know it.
I think what this all comes down to is the punchline. At the bottom, he says, and if you think you could explain the concept of systematically underestimated inferential differences briefly in just a few words, I've got some sad news for you. Which, first of all, is a reference to the fact that this entire post is pretty long, but also to the fact that it links to 3 other posts that he's made beforehand. And while he doesn't give it away in this, I think at this point it should probably be clear to most people that the purpose of the sequences and their, several Bibles length worth of word count is to bridge an inferential gap that he saw at the very beginning when he was like, here's the mass audience of everybody in 2006, and here is this conclusion I have reached, and I have to convince people of this, but oh my God, it's going to take a while. And this is a freaking impressive project that one person set about to bridge this massive inferential gap. Like, just the fact that he thought he could do it is kind of amazing to me, and then the fact that he actually did it is just crazy.
I'm very impressed by people who try to do hard things. I get pretty frustrated when people I don't know. Generally, I dislike haters, like in any field, but especially when people who see themselves as critics are bad-mouthing like some artwork or project that someone has done, or like, I'm like, okay, what have you made? It's generally.
Yeah. All right, I guess that is the sequences. I do want to point out that somehow we accidentally skipped over several dozen sequence posts to get to these. I'm not sure how that happened, maybe an accidental page down or something.
Oops.
So we're going to be backtracking quite a bit. And next episode, we will talk about the post's scientific evidence, legal evidence, rational evidence, and is molecular technology, quote, scientific? So we have skipped a few inferential steps to get here, but hopefully we can backfill them without too much trouble.
It seems like these were in the order because we just did hindsight bias and stuff.
Yes, we did. And if you go to the list of all the less wrong posts in order, the illusion of transparency and expecting short inferential differences are a few dozen down from hindsight bias.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know how that happened either, because we've had these listed as the next ones for a while. But, oh well, we'll figure it out.
It was good to talk about them, and, it's a setup for later, and then we won't have to read them later, right?
That's right. Or we can again, we'll just do it really fast.
Okay.
All right. Well, this is fun. I know that it's probably some patience on the listener's part listening to poor sound quality and the constant overlap of our voices whenever any one of us wants to start talking next because of the considerable lag time on Skype. This will be the show for a while. We'll try and mitigate that as much as possible. But anyway, thanks for bearing with us. Hope everyone's having a good it's evening here, so hope everyone's having a good time wherever they are and whenever they are. I don't have anything else to add. What about you guys?
I do have one bit of listener feedback that I don't want to put off any longer because it's directly relevant to the book that we were talking about a couple episodes back, the Talking to Strangers one. So I figured we should probably hit that right now, yeah, and we can put off the rest till later. So this one is from Why We Cur on the Discord. Says, it seems to me like the book, Talking to Strangers, is trying to say that strangers aren't possible to read and that even trained professionals get it wrong. But that just seems wrong to me, given my experience and the people I've seen. It just seems ridiculous to me to suggest that people are as opaque as the author suggests. I'm pretty sure the book is trying to say that it's mostly futile to even try to read people. When they talked about the book on the podcast, they seemed to mostly agree with its findings, or at least not be surprised by them. To me, these seems like quite strange claims. I wanted to read that because, first of all, noticing confusion is a huge foundational rationalist skill, and Wyweaker has noticed some confusion and is voicing it. And also, I wanted to know from Jess, since you're the one who read the book, was that a correct summary of the book, or did we overhype how opaque it says people are?
I think the point of the book is just that we are much worse at reading strangers than we self-evaluate. It's not to say that, like, intuition doesn't exist and that some people can't be good at this, but every chapter of the book cites multiple studies where they have shown pretty definitive, like, suggestions that I wish I had prepared a better response to this.
I guess the question would be, like, do you think this book is trying to ratchet down how confident people are, or do you think that it is saying, quote, it's mostly futile to even try to read people?
I think I'm a bit surprised by how negatively a lot of people are skewing the message of the book to be. I think that this was meant to be sort of cautionary, in particular because it focused on the case of Sandra Bland and began and ended with, police violence. It talks about court cases. That, like, Gladwell's trying to point out a legitimate problem with a lot of our systems, which are that they are systems that were designed with illusion of transparency.
Okay.
So what the book is trying to address are things like the police system, the court system, and there was the one about consent and rape culture. These are, I think, good things to point out, whether or not they make you feel good or whatever. I'm wondering whether you occur. I'm curious what they had as, like, evidence on their side, because it sounds like they're saying, from what I've seen in my experiences, this seems false. And I think that sounds a lot like having... I am really struggling to find words.
That sounds like exactly the symptom that this book is addressing, right?
Well,
like,
anecdotes
yes,
is
of course
what
you
I'm
feel
saying.
like you're confident in it, but that's sort of the point.
No, I couldn't remember the word anecdote. It's when you will describe, say your friend believes in astrology, and you say, well, scientifically that makes no sense. The stars they exist in 3D space. There's no two-dimensional shape that you can draw over them from the Earth's perspective that makes any sense.
Identical twins seem to falsify the concept of astrology, given that we don't all have identical days to our identical twins. That sort of stuff.
But people will
being a twin is actually a good case point for to counter a lot of bad arguments.
I have a lot of cases where astrology is predicted correctly. I read the astrology section in the newspaper every day, and it predicted a bunch of things really accurately. Like, I remember even being a little kid, I was reading about the description of Scorpio, and I was just like, nailed it. Like, damn. But then
there was that famous... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was probably going to bring up the same thing as you, the experiment where they will just use the exact same description of someone that's so vague that it could apply to anybody. And didn't they passed it out to people, and they were like, yeah, we've had like a professional astrologer come and analyze each of your birth years, and this is a description of you, and everybody has to rate how well they think it describes them, and everybody rates it as being very accurate. But it was
the guy who did that study. James Randi did that.
Oh, cool.
Way back in the day, I want to say in the 70s or 80s. He wore like his stage makeup. He looked crazy, and I think it was it was like his whole persona, and he was like, oh yes, I have come, and I've got a friend of mine that's really tight astrologer, and he's really good at this, and why don't you all rate how this is, and I'll come back next week and pick up your guys' assessments or whatever. Like maybe he left the room, I can't remember, but then he wrote what it was on the board, and then, all right, if you guys got this one, raise your hand, and then he gets to look, and everyone raises their hand, and then they all notice as everyone else raises their hand, and then kind of sheepishly go back down, and they're like, I didn't realize that everyone got the same one. How could it describe us all so perfectly? Yeah, I guess, and then the thing about inferring things about strangers is, I guess, like how much can you infer from somebody based off of a fact like that? I guess probably that they're not a physicist, or certainly not an astrophysicist, or not even certainly, but almost certainly. But beyond that, like, you can't read a lot of their personality. You can't, like, oh, well, they're probably like a shallow person who believes lots of pseudoscience. Maybe that's the one dumb thing they believe. Maybe when they said they believe in astrology, they used believe in a different use than you use it in, and you failed to. There was an illusion of transparency on their part, because to them, belief is synonymous with makes me feel good, or I enjoy doing this every day, right?
So I think we've gotten way off from the original question, though. Like, how well do you think people can read other people in real life? Because I usually think I can tell if people are like positively or negatively reacting to me, but maybe I should not think that at all.
I know for a fact that I can't, because I have an anxiety disorder, and I've had to do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy to get to the point where, for example, every time I go on this podcast, I'm not being like, Steven and Nidhigash hate me and think I'm dumb and don't want me to be on the podcast anymore.
No.
And like, it just...
We only think that half the time.
No, I seriously would think that about, like, I negatively skewed everything. When you have an anxiety disorder or various kinds of mental illnesses that do this sort of thing, you read into sideways glances. And then I've had lots of the kinds of interactions with people because I'm interested in this kind of stuff, and my friends are all psychology nerds, where we do have some kind of misunderstanding, and then we sit there and analyze the misunderstanding forever, and it's very much... I liked the chapter where they were talking about Friends, the show Friends. I'm trying to remember what the cognitive bias was. People being mismatched, where people have an idea of what an angry person looks like, or a jealous person, or a grieving person, and almost nobody actually does the stereotypical things that we think of as representing those. They're very much like also cultural. They're also like familial. Like, my family has a very different way of communicating and reacting to things than other people who grew up with other family structures. That's been like an interesting thing to dig into when I'm interacting with other people, where, for example, I've had people think that I'm angry because, especially when I get stressed, I default to a blank facial expression and kind of a monotone voice, and that's me dissociating or me kind of being in distress and dropping a lot of the stuff that I'm doing on manual a lot of the time, like injecting expression and tone of voice and facial expression. But neutral reads as angry to a lot of people. And they showed, there's been studies where depressed people were given a bunch of photos of people with neutral expressions, and they read them as hostile or as sad, or they were much more likely to rate the people's expressions as looking something negative.
Yeah. People who have been abused apparently are much better at seeing anger and those sorts of aggressive facial features, to the point of seeing them when they aren't there sometimes.
Yeah, like an echolalia, or I think that's the word. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the point of the book was to say that...
You've been abused.
Huh?
Oh, sorry, I was saying, which is a survival skill when you've been abused.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. It's interesting, too, because you can get, people who are really going to confuse each other if you have somebody who was raised in a very loving, stable family environment and somebody who had the opposite of that trying to interact about basic things.
Darned illusion of transparency again.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have to go, so we should thank our patron and wrap it up, yes?
Sounds good to me.
Cool. Is it my turn to thank the patron? I kind of think it is.
I think so. It's been a while.
Okay.
We don't keep track of whose turn it is, so it's not that any of us love you less. It's just that we don't keep track.
Yeah. So this week we want to thank Christopher James for supporting the podcast. He has helped bring all of this to all of you. We do not necessarily have to rely on wondering whether or not Christopher James likes our podcast, because money helps break through that illusion of transparency. You can directly signal that it's valuable to you, and this helps us bridge the inferential gap to everyone else as we keep putting out these podcasts. This is bad, isn't it?
No, it's good. And I think what we can also say is that, you know what, because we have people who financially support the podcast, while we do have a great setup for recording in a single studio with all of us, we don't have a great setup, or rather you guys don't. For mine's perfect, because I got this sexy Blue Yeti microphone. But maybe we can use some of our very generous patron dues to get you guys some mics and improve the quality of the show going forward for the next few months.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I have a mic that Eating Ash lent me. I just need to get it working with my laptop.
And to the people who aren't aware, we do
OS.
have a Discord. And I guess as far as I want to mention on the Patreon note that, I don't know what the number is today, but it's higher than it was on Friday, people who don't have jobs anymore. So if you're tight for cash, start cutting Patreon right away. Our feelings will be hurt if we don't make the cut. This isn't...
You got to make rent. That's more important.
Yeah, if you're noticing this loss of income, the loss of income that you give to us, by all means, our feelings won't be hurt. If you say, hey, sorry, job stuff, that's, by all means. I want to make sure that that's perfectly transparent to everybody.
Yes. So, thank you everybody for listening. Rate and review us on whatever podcast service you use. We greatly appreciate it. You can chat with us on the Discord, which we are using, or at least I am reading a lot more of now that I'm home all the time.
Right.
Even though I'm working from home, it also makes it easier to slack off when I'm not in the office. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, we have a subreddit that you can post on as well, and we appreciate all of you.
We sure do. This is awesome.
Okay.
And I forgot, this wraps up Rudi Hoffman's episode. If you guys do have any questions about Cryonics or life insurance, do reach out to Rudi Hoffman at rudihoffman.com. I'll link to it in the episode description as well. So, and with that, take care, everybody. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.